Okay. Well, welcome everybody to our community Medicaid update. I know they seem to happen frequently because Medicaid is changing frequently. My name is Nicole Christensen. I'm the CEO of Care Answered. I'm also the author of the book From Crisis to Calm. What we do at Care Answered is navigate people through the healthcare system to access their best care. We get healthcare done. So we do that in many ways and in many forms, and Medicaid is one of them. And so we're going to get right to it. I want to introduce our special presenter today, Christina Sammartino, and she's going to talk about the money portion of Medicaid, which is crucially important. And I'm going to talk more about the care portion. And so let me introduce Christina. Christina has been practicing law in New York State for over 7 years, and I've had the privilege of working with Christina. Again, she's part of the Care Answered family, and I only bring the best here, so you're in for a treat. After graduating law school, she went on to work for several law firms with primary practice areas in real estate, estate planning, estate administrations, guardianship, etc. And as well as Medicaid planning and applications. Christina is also certified as a guardian, court evaluator, and attorney for the AIP under Part 36 of the Rules of the Chief Judge. Christina developed an interest in estate planning after her grandfather became ill and later passed away a number of years ago without an estate plan and not knowing the importance of an estate plan. I think we can all relate, unfortunately. The complicated nature of that situation led her to understand the importance of planning ahead. With this in mind, she took courses in law school, which furthered her interest in the area of estate planning. So again, without further ado, Christina.
Thank you so much, Nicole, and thank you so much for having me here today. I'm very excited to become part of this presentation and part of your team. As you've said, the Medicaid laws are always changing. And I feel like this year alone, we've had the most changes. So it's always good to kind of get a little refresher and an update. And as you said, I'll be talking more about the financial side of things and just a brief overview of Medicaid and the program itself. My office helps clients, start the plan now financially to see where we have to move assets, whether they need trusts in order to qualify for Medicaid at a point later on, or sometimes I have clients who come in now in crisis mode where they need to plan right now to get a spouse or a loved one on Medicaid. So Medicaid is a joint federal and state program. So there are two parts of it. The federal government sets guidelines and each state has its own program. It is a means-based test with limits on income and resources. So you'll hear me say resources and assets throughout my presentation. The word is interchangeable, resources or assets, and then we have income. It pays for long-term care, which is not covered by health insurance. So Medicare does not cover long-term care. It's not a long-term care health insurance. Some supplementals may help with it, but you usually need a long-term care policy to pay for the long-term care or Medicaid. How does one qualify for Medicaid benefits? You have to be over the age of 65, blind or disabled, a resident of New York State, and be unable to perform what we call activities of daily living. So what are activities of daily living? It's bathing, toileting, grooming, dressing, eating, ambulating, and transferring. You need to be unable to perform some of these tasks in order to qualify. As far as the financial side of Medicaid, for resources, your assets, you have to have less than $30,182. This amount has significantly increased since last year. These resources include cash, stock, bonds, mutual funds, CDs, and most importantly, which most people don't realize, is life insurance policies, not the death benefit, but the cash surrender value. So if you have a life insurance benefit, the cash surrender value amount is includable in that $30,000. Nursing home Medicaid currently has a 5-year look back period. which means you'd have to provide all financials for the last 5 years, bank accounts, stock accounts, annuities, anything financial, you would have to go back 5 years. So you have to hold on to those records, or you'd have to ask the financial institutions for them. All of your income goes over to the nursing home, except for $50. The applicant can keep $50 of their income. Now, it also depends on whether or not there's a spouse involved and the amount of income. If a non-applicant spouse income is less than about $3,300, they can keep part of the applicant spouse's income. So it all really depends. It's case by case. It depends on how much income the applicant has versus the non-applicant. Last year, the previous amount was about 15,000 in countable resources. And as I said before, it's now gone up to a little over 30,000. So it almost doubled. If you transferred assets within the last 5 years, you would not qualify for Medicaid for nursing home services. They would impose a penalty upon you. And that penalty is calculated based upon the costs of the nursing home. So for a quick example, if you had gifted $100,000 away within the last 5 years, the average nursing home cost is about $20,000, which means for 5 months, somebody would be ineligible for Medicaid services because of that gift. Then we have home care Medicaid, which right now, there is no look back period. We could transfer assets to a spouse, to a child, to a trust, and there's no look back period. We could apply right away. However, the biggest change that is coming, which was supposed to start back in October of 2020 and had been delayed all of this time due to COVID, is coming March of 2024, so less than 1 year from now, there is going to be a 2.5-year look back period. Many have heard of 30 months, 2.5 years. There's going to be a look back period now for home care Medicaid, which is when someone comes into your home to take care of you. The previous income was $974. An applicant who wanted home care services was allowed to keep $974. Now they can have $1,677 of income. Again, this is a huge change. People who want to remain at home can now keep more of their income. Previously, if you had more than $974 of income, you had to contribute your excess income to a pooled income trust. These were, they're held by nonprofit organizations. There's several out there. And what happens is you basically contribute your overage to the pooled income trust. So all applicants from all over, that's why it's called a pooled trust, pool their money into it, and you would submit bills. We're now seeing, or at least I'm seeing more and more with the increase to $1,600 a month, a lot of people no longer need the pooled income trust because they only have Social Security or disability or a very low pension. And so their income does not exceed the $1,600, so they don't have to contribute any longer, which also saves them a little bit of money because just with other things, there was administrative fees to the pooled income trust. There's other fees associated with it. So now is really the time to plan with irrevocable trust and gifting and strategies to see, okay, if you have a loved one who maybe right now they don't need help with their activities of daily living, but will in the next 3 years, 3 to 5 years, now is the time to start planning. Or if you have a loved one who's on edge and maybe really needing some help, but is afraid to start the Medicaid process, now is the time to do it. Because again, if we wait until March of next year, there's going to be this 2.5-year look back period. Then we have home care and immediate need program. This is a little different than traditional home care Medicaid, and it applies when there's an immediate need for care. There's absolutely no one to care for you. There's a specific letter that needs to state what immediate need there is. It is a quicker process than the regular Medicaid application. It has to be processed within 7 calendar days as long as all the information and documentation is received. But this is case-by-case basis. This is not for everybody. There are specific guidelines as to what immediate needs there are. So again, it's really depend upon the applicant and if they have all of their documentation and information in place already. As I said before, the pooled income trust is a way to preserve income for home care applicants only. The downside to this is that if there's anything remaining in the applicant's trust at death, it stays in the trust. It does not go to the family member. So it's very important that if you contribute to a pooled income trust, you spend that money each month. We don't want it to increase. It does get rolled over to the next month, but if your loved one passes away, you lose what's ever in there. A pooled income trust, you submit all of your bills. So your taxes, your utilities, your groceries, clothing bill, cell phone bill, cable bill, any bills that you have that the applicant has in their name get submitted up to the point of their overage. So some types of Medicaid planning involves trust. And the most popular question I always get is, well, what's the difference between a revocable trust and an irrevocable trust? So a revocable trust is similar to a will. It dictates what you want to happen to your property at death. It's a private document, so you avoid probate. It's less costly because you don't have to go through an administration proceeding through the courts. And your assets immediately pass to your beneficiaries. Your trustees can distribute pretty much right away. However, revocable trusts offer no protection for Medicaid, so it's as if the assets are still in the applicant's name. An irrevocable trust is very similar to a revocable trust where, like a will, it effectuates what you want to happen to your assets upon your death. You avoid probate. There's no need for administration. It's a private document. The trustee can distribute right away. However, assets in an irrevocable trust are protected for Medicaid purposes. The grantor cannot be their own trustee. You need to make sure you appoint somebody who's going to abide by your wishes and carry out your wishes as your trustee. It's much harder to change or amend an irrevocable trust as opposed to a revocable trust. And the trustee must always act in the best interest of the beneficiaries. So if anybody has any questions, I'm happy to answer them for you.
Thank you so much, Christina. That was a whole lot of information put very concisely. Thank you. If anybody has any questions, I'm looking at the chat. Okay, there's a question. Would you use the pooled income trust for an assisted living care facility to pay for that?
It depends. Most assisted living facilities do not accept Medicaid. There are a few called ALPS, ALPS, that do take Medicaid to pay for it. So in that case, yes. And also it depends upon, some assisted living facilities will allow you to bring in caregivers. So if you're on home care while living in assisted living, then yes, you may need to contribute to a pooled income trust.
Right, and just to add on to that, from my experience, there are people that live in ALPS and their care, individualized care, like Christina had mentioned, is received through community Medicaid, but that's different than the pooled trust question. I just wanted to cover that as well. Can you use a spousal refusal? Stacy asks.
Yes, so spousal refusal is a document that's prepared along with the Medicaid application that basically says the non-applicant spouse is refusing to provide financial care for their spouse. And so oftentimes we do that when we transfer all of the assets from one spouse to the other so that no penalty is imposed. So New York says that you could transfer all of your assets from your spouse, from the applicant spouse to the non-applicant spouse without imposing a penalty. And that's even true of nursing home care. So there really isn't a 5-year look back for the transfers between spouses. You still have to provide 5 years worth of financial documentation. But if you had, $100,000 and you gave it all to the non-applicant spouse, we wouldn't have that penalty I explained earlier.
Right, and something to add on to this is something I've heard asked of me, and I always get nervous when people ask this. I get nervous for them because they say, "Oh, we're gonna get divorced for Medicaid, or a Medicaid divorce." Now, Christina knows this very well, that Medicaid is different in different states, but in New York, like was just asked, there's something called spousal refusal. So that's a really important thing to know. Now, Nancy has another question. So in 2024, there's a 2.5-year look back, and many people don't need a pooled trust. What if you have, so I just want to add to that. So many people that fall into that income will not need a pooled trust. There's a lot of other people that will need it, but it is good that they brought up the rate. It's excellent that they did that. But okay, so what if you have a pooled trust? Can you then get rid of it but still have CDPAP help? I think that's a joint question. I'm going to answer the care side. So if you have CDPAP, you have what Christina called home care Medicaid or community Medicaid. So the CDPAP, for all those who, because there's so many acronyms in the world, right? So it's Consumer Directed Personal Assistance Program. So that means you're already on community Medicaid and you're having a friend, loved one, somebody that you know provides care, and it's not through an agency, provide the care, and they're being paid via community Medicaid, via kind of a fiscal conduit, an agency through an MLTC. So if you have CDPAP again is that aide or caregiver is being paid through Medicaid. It doesn't really, and then there's some people, and I think this might be the question, but Nancy, you can tell me if I'm wrong. There are some people that have a pooled trust, and so maybe they get this many hours, or they get paid, their aides get paid this much, and they want to supplement them or have more hours, and they're paying privately for it through the pooled trust. That happens a lot. So if you no longer need a pooled trust, if this is the question, yes, you can still pay for additional hours or additional monies through, because it's now just your money. It's not going through a pooled trust.
And if I could just jump in, I think
Yes.
also a lot of people who have been on Medicaid already from previous years now maybe fall under where they have less than 1,600 and they were once contributing to a pooled trust, and now under the new guidelines no longer have to. So if that's the case, and if maybe that's the question you're asking, what would need to happen is you have to get a new budget from social services or HRA to say that now that the income requirement has gone up, you no longer have a surplus income, and ask them to rebudget the applicant and show a zero surplus income. And I've been doing that for my clients. They don't wait till recertification time. I'm working with caseworkers and sending in letters to DSS and HRA to say, hey, with the new 2023 income increase, my client no longer needs a pooled income trust. They no longer have an income surplus. Please revise the budget.
Excellent. I think that just answered the next question from Janet. At this time, I am managing my mother's pooled income trust fund under the old rules for monthly overages. Who do I speak to get that changed? And Christina is a great person to speak to. I know a lot of people this year are doing that. And you can try to do it yourself. It's likely easier with a Medicaid professional or an attorney. Can I just contact you after I missed all that? I had a call from my mom. Yes, Christina's information is right there. It's still on the screen. So you can definitely contact her or myself.
Yeah. Thank you.
Okay. No worries. No worries. Okay. So with that, if you come up with more questions, please keep them coming. Is the home considered an asset? That was the question, Christina, as well.
So you can qualify for Medicaid with a home in your name. And a lot of people who don't practice in the Medicaid field will tell you, yes, I could get you approved while you own your home, not a problem. But the issue becomes is when you pass away, DSS HRA is going to attach a lien to your home. They're going to want to be paid back. So I never advise clients to get on Medicaid while owning a home. They should really transfer to a trust or to the other spouse, a non-applicant spouse, or a child, or something, specialized plan for them. But I always recommend to my clients, while you will qualify for Medicaid owning a home, I never advise to submit that application until we get the home out of your name.
So it sounds like planning. Planning is the key. But I think it's also important to know, Christina, if you can speak a little bit about that, when somebody is married and they are married to someone who is an older adult as well, or if they have a child who has special needs in regard to the house and who's living there.
Yep. So there are certain exceptions to transferring a house. You could transfer it to a spouse, a disabled child, or a caretaker child. So if you are the caretaker child living with your parent and now they need to go into a nursing home and they have a house, the house can be transferred to the caretaker. It's called a child caretaker deed. And so there's no penalty for transferring the home over to either a spouse, a child caretaker, or a disabled child. Although with disabled children, we want to make sure we have to again plan and see what is the nature of their disability and if they're receiving any benefits and what would happen to that house once they pass away. I know something that we don't think about, but it's something that I do think about to want to make sure, okay, if we're going to transfer it to a disabled child, what is going to happen to that home then once that disabled child passes away, or are they going to lose any benefits?
Perfect. I'm going to share my screen now. Okay. Hold on one second. All right. So lots of good information. Again, if you have more questions, just keep them coming in the chat. And Christina, I'll have you look at that as well. Wait, I see that might be one here right now. Oh, no, that was good. Thank you. Very nice. Okay, so let me see if I can see anything here. Okay, so qualifying for community Medicaid. Again, I'm going to be talking more about the care situation and what the carers have changed. So Christina talked about this a little bit. So first you have to be financially eligible. That's first, right? Before we even go into the care portion. At Care Answered, I do a lot of assessments before they decide to do the financial portion, just to see if they might be eligible. And from my experience and expertise, how many hours I think they might be eligible for. So, but the general rule is you need to at least need 120 days of assistance with ADLs to enroll, right? So you didn't break your head, goodness gracious, break your leg, and it's healing, right? It's got to be something that is believed to be long-term. Now there's this thing called the NYA assessments, which stands for New York assessment. Independent assessment. Thank you. Sorry, I had a brain freeze there. To determine that you're medically eligible for community Medicaid. There are two assessments. I'm going to go more into that. There are two assessments, and then after that, there's an MLTC evaluation. That MLTC, Managed Long-Term Care, they inform you, which is heavily based on the two prior assessments, how many hours of care you're approved for. So let's talk about this New York independent assessment. One thing that's new, just February of this year, is the authorized representative authorization form, which is spelled wrong there, authorization form. So that's what you're going to need if you're doing anything for a loved one. Because if you're speaking, if you're making the appointment for the NYA assessments, that has to be completed, or else they will not talk to you. And they're very firm on that, and that's very new. So you need to have that form. As I said before, there are two assessments now. First is a nurse assessment, which can take up to 3 hours. And then there's a clinical assessment that's done by a doctor, a physician assistant, a nurse practitioner, etc. That it takes about an hour. You can get those done in person or online, virtually, generally via Zoom. I prefer oftentimes, unless the family says, no, I need somebody to see and really be there in the room. I prefer personally the virtual one because you can get a quicker it can be done quicker. And because of my years of experience, I know what they need to see and hear. But you have every right to choose to have somebody come to you, and it still has to be done within those 14 days. Okay, so as I said, it's the community health assessment. It's by a nurse practitioner, and then the clinical assessment. If hours are more, if they consider hours of 12 or more hours per day of care is needed, then it is referred, the case is referred to an independent review panel who then can determine if it is safe for that person to remain in the community. So that is quite a bone of contention, as you can imagine, to tell somebody, nope, sorry, we don't think you're safe enough. What does that mean, really? That's really, in my world, and from my understanding, saying you have to go to a nursing home, and that's against the law. You can't make somebody go someplace they don't want to go, as many of us who have children or anybody in their lives is fully aware of. You cannot make somebody do something that they don't want to do. And assessments are done annually and are valid for 12 months. This is a big change. It used to be for 75 days. So it's good for a year. So activities of daily living, this is the heavy focus for community Medicaid. What you need physical assistance doing. So I get a lot of, and I'm bringing this up because it's a question that people have, or people come to me after, and then I help with the appeal. You know, my loved one can't be left alone. It's not safe for them. That's not what they're looking at. They're looking at physical things, even cueing and supervision that somebody else has to do. It's not, they do not take much into consideration safety and supervision. I know it sounds insane. I don't make the rules, but this is how this program is created. So when we say activities of daily living, we're talking about ambulating or walking, dressing oneself, eating, bathing, turning and positioning in bed is big, and toileting. Those are the ones that have the most focus. And read that, if you would like, as to get the most hours, okay? In the assessment done by the nurse, well, this is the first NYS assessment that I mentioned, they will ask a lot about the last 3 days of assistance. So, okay, you need help dressing your upper body. Did you get assistance in the last 3 days? So I say that because it's really important, because they're asking you. And B, it might be helpful because a lot of people make do, right? We make do because we have no other help, right? I have had clients that haven't changed their clothes in the last 3 days because they don't have any help with it. So their answer would be, no, I didn't get any assistance in the last 3 days. So if that's the case, please try to get them assistance at least. Well, in general, I know that they need it. And a lot of times it's not financially or physically, you don't have somebody to help you, but within those 3 days before, try to get assistance in the home, okay? And although they don't cover safety and supervision, as I said, it's important to include in those assessments any prompts or supervisions that are needed. It's also very important to include all diagnoses. A lot of times, what I do when I'm meeting with clients beforehand, when they're determining if they want community Medicaid or just for my intake consultation, to walk them through and advocate for them through the process to get the hours of care that they need. You know, I have the luxury of experience and understanding to be like, really? I think you have, I say it all the time. I'm like, so is that breathing from congestive heart failure? Does that sound familiar? It's like, oh, yes, 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 that too. So all of your diagnoses are really important to mention so that you can get the care that you need. It's always, as an advocate, let me just say that, it's always important to mention all of your diagnosis with any clinician that you're speaking with so they can look at you as a whole person and all of your care needs, but in particular for community Medicaid to get the care you need. Okay, they also look at the instrumental activities of daily living. So managing finances, handling transportation, shopping, preparing meals, which is different than eating. Eating is more like fork to mouth. Some people can't do that. They don't have strength in their hands, they have tremors, what have you, or they don't remember how to do it. But this is preparing meals, as falls into IADLs, using a telephone, managing medication. And by managing medication, I mean, there's a lot of my clients have a loved one to fill in the pill boxes, that have the days of the week and the times of the day. So they're not administering the medications, but they're having it there. So then an aide or somebody in the house can remind them, oh, it's Monday morning. Don't forget to take your pills. So that's what I mean by managing medication, as well as picking it up from the pharmacist or even having it delivered, that kind of thing. Laundry, housework, all of those things are considered IADLs. So the changes that came, as I mentioned, there's now 2 of the assessments. And although the MLTCs do determine, managed long-term care providers, do determine how many hours of care, it's very closely based on what comes through in those assessments. So making sure those assessments are done well is very important. The primary care physician, and this has been this way for some time since since May of last year. So one's primary care physician that knows them is now kind of out of the process, because it's now being done by the 2 NYS assessors, which are independent of you. They don't have any kind of relationship with the person that they are assessing. However, you can have a doctor's input. You can make sure that that's looked at, and I do that in various ways at Care Answered. Immediate need, Christina talked about it a bit, and I want to tell you my experience. So as of December 1st of last year, the immediate need applications do go through the NIA assessment. Used to be that they didn't go through that because it took longer, we would imagine, right? And so they wanted to make it go faster. So that actually is doing pretty well. They're still getting them done pretty quickly. The holdup, what I've seen and my colleagues have seen, is actually getting the care in place, right? Just having the immediate need is just one part of it. Getting the care in place is a whole nother part. So I think we all are aware, unfortunately, that there are worker shortages of every kind, and especially in the healthcare industry, and especially in home care specifically. So I would recommend put something in place so that, again, immediate need can be done in 6 or 7 days. So put something in place, either a CDPAP, like we discussed before, if there's somebody you want to hire privately, or a loved one, family member, neighbor, friend, to provide the care, try to get that in place, because they are still going to have to get set up to be able to get paid by Medicaid. Or if you don't have that, and you want to work with a home care agency, look for home care agencies that are aligned with a home care agency that is contracted with a managed long-term care plan. And make sure you have the documentation from the nurse that does the assessment. So the nurse that does the assessment and actually tells you, that's your local Department of Social Services, actually tells you how many hours of care you get. I've been seeing, especially in the 5 boroughs, that they're not giving them that paperwork. So they're just saying, well, they told me that she said, or he said, that I got split shift care, but there's no documentation. Please never think that the Department of Social Services, as good as that person may be, or the department may be, that they have all that information. So make sure you get a copy of that and all that information so that your care can go into place quickly. And I don't know if Christina mentioned this, but the local Department of Social Services, the way that they do it, it has to be done within 6 days of the call. They do a 3-way call with NIA to set up those assessments. And those 2 assessments, like I mentioned, take place within 6 days of the call, and then 2 to 3 days for for the NYA outcome. And then within 12 days of the application, the plan of care, they're supposed to have the plan in place. However, again, as I mentioned before, with the 12 hours, if it's over 12 hours, it's still a likelihood that it might go to an independent review panel. So sometimes I've had cases that were immediate need that took over 6 months to get started. So sometimes immediate need is less than immediate in my experience. Also, a thing to know, if you do immediate need, which is great, and you've been successful, after 20 days, immediate need enrollee may get a letter stating you now have to switch to a managed long-term care, which is what traditionally community Medicaid would do, right? But don't try to, be proactive in this case. It's the only case not to be proactive. Do not get switched to an MLTC before this letter. If you don't switch to an MLTC, the letter states they will choose it for you. So the new MLTC, whether you choose it or they choose it for you, they have to keep the same hours that you were given by the Department of Social Services for 90 days at least. So even if they assess you and they say, we're giving you less hours, they have to keep for 90 days the hours you were originally given. And then if they switch you, the onus is a lot on them to reduce your hours, because what has changed that I need less hours. And then we can appeal and fight that as well at Care Answered. But just know that because people get nervous when they get letters and they're like, okay, I got to do this. And that's not the case. I had a client call me about that. And they said, no, they don't have 90 days. It was going to switch right away. That's not the case. As I said, within those 90 days, they'll probably do an assessment to determine the hours they're going to give you. Again, if hours decrease, you can appeal, and different hours will not occur until after that 90-day period. Okay, there seems to be a push as well, in my experience, for dual eligibility. That means it's like a Medicare Advantage. It's the Medicare and Medicaid all in one. PACE is when it's a medical adult daycare where all the services are provided on site, which may be great for some people, but you need to know and understand the different programs available to you. The other is MAP, which is a Medicare Advantage Plus. They have the Medicare Advantage plan with home care using only providers that take that insurance carrier. So again, I had another client who thought, okay, this was actually an immediate need case as well, in which they said, okay, you have to choose a provider. They wanted to have their same aide stay, but they were only linked with an agency that was in a MAP program. So her insurance that she got from her old job would then be discontinued, right? Because now this is a Medicare Advantage Plus. It has both of them together. So her supplemental plan or her, again, her plan from her work would end. So a lot of times that might not be your best choice because you may have great coverage and you've never paid anything, and this may change that, or your doctors may not be under that same plan. So really read the fine print, make sure you're not changing. You have time to ask questions. Don't just, hop on the first thing because you think you have to. You have time and there's questions to ask. And of course you can call Care Answered. As I mentioned, enrollees have been inadvertently signing up for MAP programs, not realizing the consequences, and it was the loss of their insurance. We were able to prevent that for a few clients, but I know there's more people that we don't see that may have that same problem. So share the knowledge. Consumer-directed personal assistance program. You don't have to be informed about that program anymore, but it doesn't seem like anybody's stopping from informing about that program because, again, the worker shortage, they seem to be pushing that program a lot. Now, they also, in 2020, there's an MLTC lockdown. What that means is once you enroll with a managed long-term care plan, you, after 3 months, within those 3 months, you can change and select a different MLTC. Now, after since 12/1/2020, you can't, after the 3 months, you cannot change that for a full year. So 9 months after that, then after the 3 months, you can potentially change your MLTC. But you can transfer from the PACE or the MAP program that I just described earlier. So what are the steps to take? Speak to an elder law special needs attorney now to plan appropriately. Planning is the key. There are also waiver programs, the nursing home transition diversion waiver program, the traumatic brain injury waiver programs that are not affected by these financial or care changes. It's not affected by NIA. It's not that kind of assessment. And even the changes so far, right, in 2024 financially will not affect the waiver programs. And get an advocate now so that you can best access the care you need. And we will continually update you here at Care Answered with changes in Medicaid. I don't think the changes will be stopping anytime soon. Hopefully some for the better. But that is it for me. I hope I didn't speak too fast. Sometimes that New Yorker gets in the way. Let me see what we have of questions. Oh, Nancy was saying, that she was assessed by Medicaid. Are these steps to take available on your website? The steps that I just mentioned about going to it. No, you can contact us. This webinar will be available. It's being recorded, as I mentioned, so you can look at it again and again, or give me a call if you want some help with the community Medicaid. Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yes, and I know you had an earlier question about a pooled income trust and recertification. The same thing. Feel free to give me a call. I'm happy to answer some questions further about that.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. So I'm looking in the chat. I don't see any other questions. We did pretty good, right? 348. But is the home considered? Oh no, that's Alan from before. Sorry. Okay, I think that was all of the questions. And I thank you so much. I thank you, Christina. I know it's a lot of information, but we're here if you have any more questions, and we're here to help you out. A client with Medicaid home care needs to make her home more disabled friendly and contacted. Huh? I'm sorry, I can't read something's in my way.
About using home equity, is that possible?
Home equity loan? You'd have to speak to a team of us regarding financial, what they can do with that, and I can steer you in the right direction there. That, like, for most things, right, we need a team. I pride myself by being surrounded by really smart people in different fields, and so I don't want to answer that because it depends, like many of the things. It might not be appropriate to get a home equity loan at that point in time, but I don't know.
Yes, I agree. He just said a reverse, and yes, I agree on a team. And yes, I agree with Nicole. I work with lots of other people, not necessarily a lawyer or somebody like Nicole, but, reverse mortgage specialists and regular mortgage, specialists, and really seeing, that specific individual and what they need. Most of what we do, while it seems like cut and dry and cookie cutter, it's not. The processes in the laws are what they are. The activities of daily living are what they are. But each client that we have and that we represent, it differs dramatically from one person to the next. I have yet to, and I know, Nicole, I'm sure you could say the same, have clients who, the same plan, we're going with the exact same plan. I haven't had that yet.
Yeah, it doesn't work that way because we're all unique individuals, and that's what makes it beautiful, right, to live in this beautiful world, but it also makes it tricky to navigate for people, for individuals, because what do you mean I can't do exactly what my friend did? But it's not the same. So it's good to have a team that can look at all points of view. That's why I never answer a question based on one thing, because I don't know the whole story. All right. Well, thank you all so much again for joining us. And we'll be here, Care Answered will be here next month with some wonderful tips as well. So hopefully we'll see you then, and enjoy your spring.